Okay, so for Aries, I have to give a little disclaimer here because I am a Sagittarius and Aries is a fellow fire sign. And every astrology book that I ever read says that I'm supposed to get along famously with Aries and Leo because Leo is another fire sign. And I've never really been crazy about those two signs from the people that I have met. But as I embark upon these observations of the various sun signs, you have to keep in mind that obviously this is subjective. This is my opinion based upon my experiences. And I mean no offense to anybody when I point out things that I don't like, because I realize that you can't be prejudiced. You have to realize that there are going to be bad apples in every sign. And I might have just run across those that are, annoying, who happen to be Aries or Leo. And I always keep an open mind, but I just have to keep it real because that's what I'm all about. So, in terms of the traits that I have noticed in Aries, let me start with the positives. And one thing I really admire about Aries people is that they are really great at initiating projects. And they have this energy that if you are around it, and especially if you're like me and you only have one cardinal sign in your whole chart, you feel a sense of being energized. Aries is the first sign of the zodiac. It's also a cardinal sign and a fire sign. And so that fiery cardinal energy lends itself to great enthusiasm by these people. They love beginnings because they are the beginning of the astrological new year in the spring. And so an Aries person can have all of the vision in the world. And if you are in business with them or doing some kind of collaboration with them, you know, they're a great person to have on your team in that sense. Another thing I like about Aries is that they are generous people. You know, they're generous without being conniving, or manipulative. They're not trying to get anything for it. They're just like naturally have an open pocketbook. And that's really impressive because there are people who will be generous, but they have ulterior motives. And that is not Aries. And because of this generosity, I think the law of attraction gives them abundance, usually. I see that most Aries people that I have met are not in lack consciousness, and therefore they tend to attract, you know, um, prosperity. So that's really a wonderful quality that they have. They're also open. You know, I rarely meet an Aries person who is fake, who has this mask. They are very relatable. They're very without any kind of artifice. And I find that quality very refreshing because too often when you deal with other people, you get a sense that you're not really knowing how they feel about issues. And Aries is very honest. Sometimes they can be blunt like Sagittarians can be, but it's always, in a good natured way. There's not this malicious quality. When you're dealing with an Aries person who is, together and exemplifying the positive traits of Aries, I should say, because let's talk about an afflicted Aries. And I think you will see that with a lot of hard aspects to the sun. But I was going to say if they have childhood trauma, that could be an indication, but that would probably show up in their chart as well in terms of the kinds of abuse that they suffered, maybe squares and oppositions to the sun and other personal planets. But one example of a shadow quality of Aries is being competitive. And being the first sign of the zodiac, Aries tends to want to be number one in everything that they do. And so they want to be at the beginning of the line. They want to get served first. They want to have everything first. Not like Leo in terms of feeling like they are, royalty or anything and having an elitist attitude. They're just impatient. And that manifests itself in the desire to do everything as quickly as possible. And the problem with that mentality is that when you're always rushing, you never can savor anything. And so being impatient tends to cause more problems than you would imagine. You have to learn how to be meditative in order to make good decisions and avoid mistakes. And Aries can be very rash. Being a cardinal sign, they like to act, but when they're emotional, and fire signs are emotional, they can tend to act rashly and without thinking because they're caught up in some negative emotion, and or even a positive emotion. You don't want to be um, in that state where you're not thinking things through. You always want to think things through. Of course, I'm a rising sign Taurian, and I like to deliberate before I act, and I have very low cardinal in my chart, so that's that. But another negative side of Aries is violence and a bad temper. Um, Again, this is not going to be with every Aries person. I have found in my interactions with Aries that there tend to be two general types of Aries. One is what I call the pure Aries, and the other is this more, rageaholic type of Aries. Ryan O'Neal is an Aries, and he has been known for having some of that kind of negative manifestation of an Aries type of person. Russell Crowe is an Aries. Marlon Brando was an Aries. I think it was a double Aries, Sun and Moon, which was really something. But the negative Aries with the bad temper tends to get very frustrated when they can't have their way, much like a baby having a temper tantrum and or a toddler and just throwing things around. I think Russell Crowe got in trouble for throwing a phone or something. And they can really look to the outsider as very childish. And this is due to that rash nature again. Another thing is because they're a cardinal sign, they can be controlling. They want to have things their way, they want other people to act as they want them to act. And this can get very tedious and hard to deal with if you're in a close relationship with an Aries person who is exhibiting this sort of negative trait. And I find that Aries women have a harder time with relationships sometimes than Aries men because we still live in a society where women are conditioned to be more accommodating to their partners. And by the way, I am talking about it from a heterocentric point of view, and I apologize for that, but it makes it easier to talk about the male female dynamic. I don't mean to slight gay couples, but you know, um, when you're dealing with the opposite sex and you're a woman in this society and you are very assertive or aggressive, um, you might have a harder time getting along with a man, even in 2014. And some of the famous female Aryans who had some slight difficulties in relationships are Betty Davis and Joan Crawford. And I think they exemplified the negative Aryan traits more than the positive ones, unfortunately. Another shadow side of the Aries is cruelty, and that goes along with violence. And again, this is not always going to be apparent. The pure type of Aries person is extremely positive, and I have met um, a couple of people like this, and it's so refreshing to be around them because they are just very inspirational. When an Aries person is cruel, I tend to think that they are jealous or envious of the other person, and this causes them to feel competitive, and they can't stand that this other person is ahead of them in some area, and so they act with malice. But as I said, this is not always going to be apparent in an Aries person, Aries sun, I should say. So I hope that you guys who are listening to this found it at least somewhat interesting. Please comment if you have any additional opinions on Aries. Thanks a lot. Bye.